The twin suns of the colony world Alaris 7 slowly dipped below the jagged horizon, casting golden light across the endless fields. The air smelled of warm soil and fresh wind. It was peaceful, so quiet that even the breeze whispered like a lullaby. James. Carter wiped sweat from his brow and stood tall beside his hoverplow. He looked over his crops with a calm expression. Corn, wheat, and red berries. He had planted them all with care. He lived alone on the edge of the Sarathi zone, far from the big human settlements. That was exactly how he liked it. James was tall, strong, and quiet. His hands were rough from farming, but there was a sharpness in his eyes like someone who had once seen too much. Most people assumed he was just another settler. They didn't know his past, and he never offered it. A soft voice called from the hill above. "James, the river plants are blooming early." He turned and saw her. Viola. She stood tall and graceful, with light blue skin and long silver hair tied behind her back. She wore a robe made of plant fibers and carried a small basket filled with glowing seeds. She smiled as she walked toward him. Vela was a Sarathi, one of the few alien species who lived peacefully alongside humans. Her people were known for science, healing, and kindness. She worked at the botanical station nearby, studying the plants of Alaris 7. James gave a small nod. "That's good news. You were hoping for early growth, weren't you?" "Yes," she said, kneeling beside a row of red berries. "It means the soil is healthy again. Your compost idea worked." James shrugged. "Just something I remembered. From Earth." Vela tilted her head, studying him. "You always say that, but sometimes your Earth ideas sound more like military field techniques than farming." James smiled faintly but didn't answer. They worked together until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the land. As always, their time passed in comfortable silence, interrupted only by the chirps of local insects and the gentle buzz of flying pods above. Later, they sat beside a small fire near James's home. He handed her a cup of warm berry tea. "Have you noticed anything strange?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her. "Strange how?" "Our sky station picked up a signal yesterday. A ship entered orbit but didn't respond to our calls. It didn't have any identification. It's just sitting there." James's eyes narrowed. "You told the humans?" "I sent a report. They said not to worry. Probably a lost merchant ship." James sipped his tea slowly. His jaw tightened. Vela looked at him again, this time with concern. "Do you think it's something else?" He didn't reply at first. Then he said, "I think when a ship doesn't answer, it's because it doesn't want to." That night, James stood outside his small home looking at the stars. His muscles were relaxed, but his mind was alert. He had lived through too many battles to ignore gut feelings, and his gut told him something was coming. The next day, he visited Viola's village to deliver some supplies. The Sarathi homes were built in harmony with the land, curved structures grown from living wood and covered in soft moss. Children played in the sunlight while elders sang songs near the central pool. Viola was inside the greenhouse checking plant readings. She smiled as James entered. "Is that for me?" she asked, pointing to the basket of food in his arms. "Some dried red berries and corn cakes." "You're too kind," she said softly. "We're lucky to have you nearby." James didn't respond. He never took praise easily. Before he left, Viola touched his arm gently. "If anything strange happens, you'll come back, won't you?" He looked at her hand, then into her eyes. "Always." That night, everything changed. James was working late in the fields when the sky turned orange. He looked up and saw fire trails, ships entering the atmosphere fast. They weren't human, they weren't Sarathi, and they weren't friendly. His heart pounded. He dropped his tools and ran to his bike. Dust flew as he raced toward the Sarathi village. But when he arrived, it was too late. Smoke rose into the night sky. Homes burned. The singing pool was shattered. James stepped off his bike and looked around with wide eyes. Silence. Then a faint cry. He He followed the sound, stepping carefully, over broken branches and scorched grass. He found a young Sarathi girl hiding under a collapsed roof beam. He lifted it with one hand and pulled her out gently. "Where are the others?" he asked her. "They took them," she whispered, her eyes full of tears. "Big ones in armor, metal faces." James clenched his jaw. "Did they take Vela?" The girl nodded. James stood slowly, his hands curled into fists. He looked out into the trees, where broken branches marked a path, the direction the attackers had gone. No ships in sight. They must have landed in stealth mode. This wasn't a random attack, it was a planned raid. He turned back to the girl. "Go hide in the root cellar under my home, you'll be safe there." "What about you?" James didn't answer. He was already walking into the dark forest. As the moon rose high, James followed the trail deeper into the woods. Every broken twig, every footprint. He read them like a book. He moved silently like a shadow. His mind drifted back to old days, years spent in hidden wars across human colonies. He had tried to leave that life behind, but now it was waking up inside him again, and this time, it was personal. He found the camp just after midnight, crude tents, supply crates, strange weapons leaning against trees. A group of armored figures sat around a fire, laughing in a harsh language he didn't recognize. Metal helmets, heavy gear, mercenaries most likely. In the center of the camp, tied to a tree, were several Sarathi villagers. Among them, Vila. She looked hurt but alive. Her head rested on her shoulder, eyes closed. James's breathing slowed. His heartbeat was steady. He counted the guards. Not many. They didn't expect resistance. They didn't know what he could. So he slipped back into the shadows, already planning. He didn't need weapons, he was the weapon. James crouched behind a thick tree trunk, watching the enemy camp from a distance. Shadows from the fire flickered across the strange armored bodies of the attackers. There were 6 of them. Tall, strong, not human, not Sarathi. Their armor looked heavy but worn, like they had raided before. He counted 3 tents, 2 crates full of weapons, and 1 large transport parked on the side. They had moved fast, taken prisoners, and built this camp deep in the forest where no patrols would find them. James's eyes stayed fixed on one place. Vela. She was tied to a tree in the center of the camp, next to 2 other Sarathi villagers. Her head hung low, but her chest moved. She was still alive. A sharp voice came from the fire. One of the armored beings stood and walked over to Vela. He lifted her chin with a metal-clad hand and said something in his strange language. Vela's eyes opened slightly. She didn't answer. The armored figure laughed and let her head fall back down. James's grip tightened around the branch in his hand. These raiders thought no one would come for their prisoners. They didn't know who they had taken. They didn't know that James Carter had once been part of Earth's most elite special unit, trained for silent attacks, quick kills, and brutal close combat. They were about to find out. He moved silently around the edge of the camp. His body flowed through the trees like water. No sound, no trail. He grabbed a long, curved branch and sharpened the edge against a rock. Not perfect, but strong enough for what he needed. Then he waited. One of the guards got up and walked toward the trees, probably for a quick patrol. James crouched low and followed. The raider walked past a tall bush. That's when James struck. He moved like lightning. His arm wrapped around the guard's neck, and the sharpened branch pressed into the soft gap between helmet and armor. The raider struggled, but only for a moment. Then everything went still. James dragged the body behind a rock and took the guard's weapon, a short energy baton. It hummed softly. He returned to the edge of the camp, now with a tool in hand and fire in his heart. The campfire crackled. 2 of the raiders stood guard. 3 more sat nearby, eating some kind of dried food. They laughed and spoke in harsh, guttural tones. They had no fear. They thought they were safe. James stepped out of the shadows and moved like a ghost. He came up behind the first guard and drove the baton into the back of the armor. Sparks flew. The raider collapsed without a sound. Before the second guard could react, James kicked him in the back of the knee, sending him crashing down. The baton struck again. Now there were only 3 left. They stood quickly, weapons drawn, eyes searching. Too late. James ran into the firelight. His face was calm, his body focused. He ducked the first shot, rolled across the ground, and swept a leg under the nearest raider. The baton cracked against the helmet. The second raider lunged. James dodged left and used the attacker's own weight to slam him into a crate. The last raider charged with a roar. James dropped the baton and grabbed the attacker's wrist. With a twist and pull, the arm snapped backward and the weapon clattered to the ground. James punched forward, once, twice, 3 times. The armored helmet cracked. The raider fell. Silence returned to the camp. Only the fire remained. James dropped to one knee beside Vela. Her eyes fluttered open. "James?" she whispered. "I'm here," he said, quickly cutting her ropes. "You're safe now." She leaned into him, weak but still alive. "They came at night. We didn't have time to run." "I know," James said. "It's over now." The other villagers were freed as well. James gave them water and checked their injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but they were weak and shaken. Vela looked at him with wide eyes. "You fought them all. With your hands." "I've done it before," he said quietly. "You're not just a farmer, are you?" James didn't answer. He only helped her to her feet. "We need to move," he said. This was just a scout team. The real threat might be coming soon. As they walked through the forest, Vela stayed close to James. "You could have been killed," she said softly. "I had to come," he replied. "They took you." Her hand brushed against his arm. "You didn't hesitate." James looked ahead. Not for a second. They reached his farm just before sunrise. The young Sarathi girl James had rescued earlier came running from the root cellar. "Vila!" she cried, hugging her tightly. James guided everyone into his home. He gave them food, water, and blankets. They needed rest. He would keep watch. Vela sat beside him as the others slept. "You risked everything for us," she said. "Why?" James looked at the horizon. The sun was rising. "Because I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not while people I care about were in danger." Vela's eyes searched his face. "There's a fire inside you, a kind of rage, but you use it to protect, not destroy." James nodded slowly. "It's always been there. I just try to aim it in the right direction." She reached out and gently touched his hand. "Thank you." For a moment they said nothing. The wind outside whispered through the trees, then Vela said, "What do we do now?" James stood and looked toward the mountains. "We get ready," he said. "Because those raiders will come back, and next time they'll bring more." Far above, in the blackness of space, the silent ship that had first entered orbit began to move. New signals flashed, new coordinates were sent. In a distant chamber, others like the raiders reviewed the loss of their scout team. They didn't know the name James Carter. But soon, they would. The morning after the raid, James stood at the edge of his farm, staring into the woods. The ground was still marked from the hoverbike trails. The air was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the quiet before something worse. Inside his small home, the rescued Sarathi villagers were still resting. They were safe for now, but James knew it wouldn't last. The scout team that attacked Viola's village was only the beginning. More were coming. Stronger, smarter, better armed. He couldn't wait. He had to find them first. Vela stepped out of the house, a blanket around her shoulders. Her silver hair fell across her face, but her eyes were calm. "You're leaving again," she said. James nodded. "They'll come back. I want to know when and how many. I'll come with you." "No." His voice was firm but gentle. "You need to stay and protect the others." Vela stepped closer. "You protected us. Let me help you now." He paused, then said, "If I don't return by nightfall, lead them to the northern caves, the old tunnels." She nodded slowly. Be careful, James. I always am, he said, but his eyes told the truth. He was ready to do whatever it took. James moved fast through the forest, eyes scanning every tree, every trail. The signs were clear: bent branches, heavy footprints, burned patches in the grass. The enemy had marched south toward the rocky valley. He followed. Hours passed. The wind grew colder as the trees thinned. Rocks jutted from the ground like broken teeth. James found signs of recent digging, marks from landing pads, and scraped metal on stone. The invaders were setting up a base. He crouched behind a large boulder and looked down into the valley. There they were. A larger camp had been built. Not 6 raiders this time, but nearly 30. More armored warriors, walking in pairs. A large command tent sat in the center, surrounded by crates of weapons and blinking machines, and in the middle of it all, cages. James's eyes narrowed. More prisoners. Other Sarathi, maybe from farther villages. One was crying. Another lay still. James's blood boiled. He didn't feel fear. He didn't feel doubt. He felt fire. It started in his chest, slow and deep, a heat that rose with every heartbeat. He had tried to live quietly. He had tried to forget the man he used to be. But these invaders had woken something inside him. Something old, powerful, and sharp. That night, the valley was quiet. The moon shone above like a silent watcher. The raiders didn't notice the shadow moving among the rocks. James struck fast and silent. The first guard fell before he could speak, a broken neck. The second dropped with a strike to the throat. James grabbed a short blade and slipped into the shadows again. A group of 3 passed near the cages. James attacked from above, dropping like a hawk. He struck the first with the blade, kicked the second into a wall, and slammed the third's head into a crate. Alarms started to buzz. Now they knew. James didn't stop. He ran into the camp like a storm, grabbing weapons, smashing lights, breaking systems. He didn't use guns, he didn't need them. He was the weapon. The command tent burst open. A tall figure stepped out, wearing black armor with red lights across the chest. This was no scout. This was a war leader. He barked orders in a strange language, and a group of 10 raiders rushed toward James. James stood in the middle of the camp, breathing slow and steady. His eyes were sharp, his hands were ready. The first attacker lunged. James stepped aside and slammed his elbow into the back of the raider's helmet. The second swung a glowing baton. James ducked, grabbed the attacker's arm, and twisted it until the weapon dropped. He kicked the baton into the air and caught. And now he had a weapon too. He used it like lightning. Each move was clean, precise. He didn't waste energy. He struck hard and fast, dodged attacks, and turned his enemy's strength against them. One by one, the raiders fell. The war leader growled and stepped forward. James met him without hesitation. They clashed. Fist against fist. Strength against strength. The leader was bigger, heavier, but slower. James used speed and skill. He struck the gaps in the armor, hit the weak spots, dodged heavy blows. The leader roared and grabbed James by the arm, trying to lift him, but James twisted and drove his knee into the leader's side. Metal cracked. With a final push, James slammed the baton into the leader's helmet. Sparks flew. The leader dropped. Silence. James stood alone in the center of the broken camp. Around him, the raiders were down. Some groaned. Most did not move. He turned and ran to the cages. With a piece of broken armor, he smashed the locks and pulled the doors open. The prisoner stared at him in shock. "Go," he said. "Run to the north. Follow the stars. Tell the others I'm coming." The next morning, James returned to his farm, body covered in dirt, sweat, and bruises. He limped slightly, but his eyes were bright. Vela ran to him the moment she saw him. "You're hurt," she cried. "I've had worse," he said with a faint smile. She helped him inside, cleaned his wounds, and gave him water. "You were gone all night. There were more of them. But they're dealt with." Her hand trembled as she held his. "I saw the fire in your eyes when you fought for us. It scared me." He looked at her. "It scares me too. But it also saved us?" she said softly. And I'm glad it's you who carries it. They sat in silence for a long time. Then, James spoke. This isn't over. If they sent that many raiders already, there's more behind them. A fleet, maybe. I'll need to train the others. I'll help, Vela said. You don't have to carry this alone. He looked at her, really looked, and nodded. Then let's prepare. That night, the people of the valley gathered. Humans and Sarathi stood together listening as James spoke. We are not soldiers, he said, but we can become defenders. If we fight together, we can stop them. He showed them how to use simple weapons, how to move, how to listen. His calm voice gave them strength. His quiet fire gave them courage. And as the stars moved overhead, the people knew James Carter was not just a farmer. He was their shield, their fire, their hope, and nothing would take their world without a fight. The days passed quickly after the rescue. James no longer worked his farm. The crops could wait. Now, he trained warriors. Sarathi men and women came from nearby villages carrying old tools, hunting bows and determined eyes. Some had never held a weapon before. Others had only known peaceful lives. But they came for one reason. They had heard the story of a human who fought raiders with his bare hands. The one who walked into danger alone and came back with the prisoners. The fire in James Carter had lit something in their hearts. Every morning the villagers gathered in the clearing beside James's home. He showed them how to stand, how to move, how to strike. He spoke in calm words using clear steps. No fancy talk, no lies. When you fight, don't think of revenge, he said. Think of who you're protecting. They listened. They learned. Vela trained beside them. She moved with focus, her steps sharp, her aim steady. She never missed a session. James saw the strength in her. Quiet, steady, powerful. At night, James sat by the fire looking up at the stars. He could feel something out there. A ship, a fleet, watching, waiting, and he was right. Far above the planet, a large vessel moved into orbit, dark, quiet, and full of life. Inside the ship, Commander Threx stood before a large screen. Report, he said. A smaller officer bowed. Scout team destroyed. Base camp wiped out. Survivors say, a human did it. Threx's red eyes narrowed. One human? Yes, sir. He fights with no fear. The prisoners call him the Fire-Hearted. Threx turned away. Prepare the dropships. We'll end this ourselves. The next morning, James woke before sunrise. The air felt different, heavy, tense. Birds were silent. Even the wind had stopped. Viola stood outside, looking toward the eastern sky. They're coming, aren't they? She asked. James didn't answer right away. He only looked at the clouds. A small dot appeared, then another, and more. Ships, dozens. The storm had arrived. James gathered everyone in the central field. His voice was calm but strong. They're landing east of the valley. We don't have their weapons, we don't have their numbers. But we do have something more important. He looked into their eyes. We have each other. The villagers nodded. Some were scared, but none ran. James's fire had spread. He split the group into teams. Viola would lead the archers. The older villagers would protect the young. The strongest would stand at the front. Then he spoke one last time. Remember, we're not here to destroy. We're here to protect. As the first raider ship landed, the ground shook. Trees snapped. Dust rose. Threx stepped out with 50 soldiers behind him. Their armor glowed red. Their weapons hummed. But the valley was quiet. Too quiet. Then arrows flew from the trees. 2 raiders dropped. Shouts filled the air. James's fighters moved like a wave, fast, focused, trained. The battle had begun. James ran into the middle of the fight. He moved, between trees using speed and timing. He knocked weapons from enemy hands. He guided his fighters with short commands. Left side, hold the line. Archers, aim low. Viola stood on a rock ledge, sending clear signals to the archers. Her sharp eyes caught every movement. Her arrows never missed. Still, the enemy was strong. Threx stepped forward, swinging a heavy energy blade. It cut through trees like paper. James met him head-on. Their blades clashed. Sparks flew. "You're the human," Threx growled. "You caused all this." "I protected my people," James said. "They are not your people. You don't belong here." "I belong where I'm needed." They fought blade to blade, hand to hand. Threx was powerful, but James had something more: purpose. He wasn't fighting for pride. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for them. For every Sarathi child hiding in the hills. For every mother waiting in the caves. For every villager who now held a weapon with shaking hands but steady hearts. The fight grew fierce. Threx roared and swung his blade. James ducked, rolled, and struck the weak point in Threx's armor. Sparks flew again. Threx stumbled back. "You think this makes you strong?" the commander said. James stepped forward. "No, they make me strong." At that moment, the villagers rushed from the trees, pushing the enemy back. One by one, the raiders fell or fled. The fire in the valley was not from weapons. It was from hearts. By evening, the battlefield was quiet. Smoke rose from the east. Broken ships lay scattered. The villagers stood together, tired but unbroken. Vela found James sitting on a rock, breathing slowly. "You did it," she said, kneeling beside him. "We did it," James corrected. She smiled. "The others call you the Flame Guardian now." James chuckled lightly. "Sounds dramatic, but true," she said, placing her hand over his. "You protected all of us." James looked around at the people. He saw fighters, builders, dreamers. Not humans, not Sarathi, just people. "I'm staying," he said. Vela tilted her head. "You were planning to leave?" "Before. A long time ago. Not anymore." She squeezed his hand gently. That night, a feast was held. Simple food. Music from wooden flutes. Laughter filled the air. James didn't sit in the center. He stayed at the edge, watching the joy. He didn't need praise. He only needed peace. Viola joined him. "We rebuilt today," she said. "Not just the village, the spirit too." James nodded. "It's just the beginning." From above, stars twinkled gently. The sky no longer held threats, only light. In the darkness beyond the stars, other enemies might still be watching. But now they knew, this world had defenders, and at the center of them stood one human, not born here, but one of them. James Carter, the man with fire in his hands and peace in his heart. A week had passed since the great battle in the valley. The sky was clear again. Birds returned to their trees. Children ran between huts, laughing and free. The air no longer smelled of smoke or fear. The people had begun rebuilding. Homes were repaired, crops were replanted, fences were made stronger, watchtowers were built from old ship parts. Everyone had a job and everyone helped. At the center of it all was James Carter. He did not sit on a throne. He did not give orders from high ground. He worked with the others, lifting logs, building walls, digging water channels. He was always moving, always helping. His presence brought comfort. Where James walked, people felt safer. Viola watched him from the distance, a soft smile on her face. He was different now, not just the outsider who lived alone, not just the quiet human farmer. He had become something more, a symbol, not because of power, but because of heart. She approached him with 2 cups of water. He took one and drank, sweat on his brow and dirt on his hands. "You should rest," she said. James shook his head with a grin. "Later, the roof still needs fixing. You've already done more than anyone here." "That's not true," James replied. "Everyone is doing their part. That's what makes this place strong." She looked around at the people, Sarathi and human allies alike working side by side. "You've changed everything," she said. James looked at her, his voice soft. They changed me first. That evening, a council of elders from nearby Scifi villages arrived. They had heard the stories. They had seen the remains of enemy ships, and now they came to speak with the man who had stood against the storm. Inside a large gathering tent, the elders sat around a fire. James entered, quietly. He didn't wear armor, just his work clothes. Still, every eye turned to him with respect. An elder stood. James Carter, you saved many lives. You fought when others would have run. You gave us hope. We offer you a place in our council. James looked around the circle. Their faces were kind but serious. I didn't do this to gain a title, he said calmly. I fought because it was the right thing to do, the elder smiled. And that is why we trust you. Viola stood at his side. He is one of us now, not by birth but by choice. Another elder nodded. Then it is decided. Let his name be written in our stone records, as friend, protector, and brother. James felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had never wanted to lead, but now he led through action, not command. The days turned into weeks. Life returned to the valley. But peace did not mean silence. James kept preparing. He built a small training ground on the far edge of the farm. Each morning the younger ones practiced there. Sword drills, staff skills, teamwork games. James taught them all. They will come again, he once told Vela. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not for years. But when they do, this world will not be weak, Vela agreed. Then we'll be ready. James looked at her. We. You always say we. She smiled. Because it was never just you. One morning a strange signal came through the old human beacon tower. James stood by the console reading the blinking message. Human transport ship approaching. Peaceful. Requesting landing. It had been years since he saw a message like that. He looked at Vela. Could be merchants or settlers, or... She placed a hand on his arm. Or someone looking for you? James nodded slowly. The ship landed 2 hours later. It was large, silver, and smooth. The landing was clean and careful, no weapons visible. James, Vela, and a small group waited at the landing field. The ramp lowered with a hiss. A tall woman stepped out, dressed in a clean black uniform. Her hair was gray at the sides, and her eyes sharp. She looked at James for a long moment. James Carter, she said. It's been a long time, he nodded. Admiral Reen, you're hard to find. I wasn't hiding, just living. She looked around at the Scifi, at the peaceful village. We received word through old channels, stories of a human, warrior who defended an alien world. I didn't believe it at first. James remained silent. We came to see if you were still alive, or if you wanted to come back. Viola looked at him, heart beating faster. James's face was calm. I appreciate that, but I'm where I belong. Reen raised an eyebrow. Even after all you've done, you don't want to return to Earth? To your people? James glanced at the villagers behind him, the children peeking from behind trees, the warriors he had trained, the fields he helped grow. These are my people, he said simply. Reen smiled slightly. Then maybe we can offer trade, teach each other, help, protect this place. James nodded. That would be welcome. Reen gave a short bow. Then this will be the beginning of something new. As the ship left later that evening, James stood beside Vela on the hilltop. I didn't know what I would say, he admitted. You said the truth, she replied. James turned to her. I used to believe strength came from power. Then I believed it came from control. But now I see. Real strength comes from protecting something you love. Vela's eyes softened. And what do you love, James? He looked into her eyes. This place, these people. You. She placed her hand in his. No more words were needed. Time passed. New buildings rose. Children grew stronger. Trade routes opened. and every story began the same way. There was once a man, not from this world, who stood with bare hands and an open heart. He fought not to conquer, but to protect. He came from the stars, but chose to stay on the ground. And when danger came again, his fire burned brighter than ever before. James Carter, protector, warrior, human, had become a legend. But to those who knew him, he was still the same man who dug ditches, fixed roofs, and held a quiet strength in his heart.